Welcome to Podcast on the Brink, your weekly dose of Indiana basketball news and discussion, brought to you by the Assembly Call and Inside the Hall. I'm your host, Jerod Morris. Join me live at assemblycall.com every Thursday night and immediately following every IU game for our live IU postgame show. And visit InsideTheHall.com for complete coverage of IU basketball and to join the discussion in the Inside the Hall Premium Forum. Wow, what a night last night turned out to be for Archie Miller and the Indiana Hoosiers. I was back with my daughter, reading her some books, getting her ready for bed, and I come out and my phone is blowing up and Twitter is going crazy because Khristian Lander has committed to Indiana. Sent out a tweet. I don't think anybody was expecting it. You know, obviously this is a recruitment that we've been following, but kind of came out of the blue, but absolutely huge news for Indiana and for Archie Miller. Now, of course, the big question will be whether he reclassifies and comes in the class of 2020 or finishes out his high school career as scheduled and then comes in the next year. We will wait to see. But obviously, that's the big news. We're going to talk about it this week on Podcast on the Brink. Kyle Neddenriep from the Indianapolis Star is here. He is going to give us some thoughts on Lander's commitment, what kind of player he is, how he projects to the next level. Kyle knows these guys as well as anybody, so we really appreciate his time hopping on with us. And then Alex Bozich will be here, and he and I will discuss what the Lander commitment means, how he projects to this roster moving forward. And then also, hey, there's a big game coming up tomorrow night. IU plays Purdue, and so we talk about that as well, and much more. This is a jam-packed, fun episode of Podcast on the Brink. We appreciate you being here. And lots of good stuff coming. So that's what's on tap this week. Before we get to all of that, I do want to talk about home field apparel because some other news broke on Twitter, which you may not have seen, which is that home field apparel is getting ready to release 2 new Indiana shirts. And that is always big, exciting news. I think they said they're going to release them on March 1st or thereabouts. I can promise you, I have no idea what these new shirts are, so I'm going to be as excited as you are to see what they are. I would certainly assume that they are basketball related, but that's definitely something to keep an eye on. And, if you haven't been to homefieldapparel.com, they have so many unique Indiana items. Obviously they have a lot of different, types of shirts. You can get t-shirts, you can get long sleeve tees, hoodies, crew neck sweaters. It's all so comfortable. It's comfortable from the moment you open the package. It stays comfortable even after you wash it. And they've just got some of the most unique designs that you'll find anywhere. Logos and brand marks from long ago that they pull back, give new life to, like the Bison logo, like the Indiana Shoes logo. They've got the great Indiana Champions t-shirt. So there's so many options there. So whether you want some new gear for yourself, whether you want to shop for a friend or family member who's an IU fan, homefieldapparel.com is the place to go. And when you use the promo code BRINK, BRINK, you get 20% off your entire order. That's promo code BRINK for 20% off your entire order. So you can go use that now. Or if you want to wait until March 1st, see what those new shirts are, see what those new designs are, certainly use that promo code then. And again, it's homefieldapparel.com. All right. Let's hop into this. Let's talk first with Kyle Neddenriep about Khristian Lander, and then Alex Bozich will join me, and we will talk about Khristian, about IU, Purdue, and much more. Here we go. Here's this week's Podcast on the Brink. All right, we're pleased to be joined by Kyle Neddenriep from the Indianapolis Star. Kyle, when I saw the news last night that Khristian Lander had committed, I think I sent you a direct message right after that because you were definitely the first person that I wanted to talk to about it. You know these guys as well as everybody, covering Indiana high school hoops like you do. So thanks for joining us, number one. And what was your initial reaction to the commitment when you saw it come through?
Yeah, I guess. Well, thanks for having me on, Jerod. I was surprised by the timing of it. I don't think probably most people expected this would happen. He's still finishing out his high school season, and they still have some time to go. So it's just you don't normally see commitments this time of year necessarily, but kind of had heard a little bit about the possibility of a reclassification. That had actually kind of been something talked about. From people I'd talked to for a while about Khristian Lander. So that the possibility of that being something that could happen, not a total shock, but and honestly, not total shock that it was IU, because I think people have kind of been feeling for a while like IU was making up ground in that situation, but for it to happen now for Khristian Lander, I think was a little bit of a surprise to everybody. Just the timing of when it happened, and but I can't say I was totally shocked that it was IU, and not at all shocked that the reclassification is potentially on the table if he can make it work.
I think most people listening to this have probably seen, they know how highly he's ranked. They've probably seen a lot of the highlight videos, which are undeniably impressive because he's got great athletic talent, obviously can make shots. He's a playmaker on both ends, all those things. Can you give us maybe a more detailed scouting report, assessment of his strengths and weaknesses that you might get more watching him play full games as opposed to just highlight videos?
Yeah, that's always kind of the thing, right? I mean, you see him, the highlights always look great, and with Khristian, they certainly do. I mean, and not to say, he's not a great player, but I think that, the highlight videos only give you a partial look. And I have not, I saw him play last. It was in December at the Southport Invitational that Brian Snow puts on. The one-day event there. So I haven't seen him for a little while, but did see him quite a bit in the summer. And, I have seen him play for Evansville Rights. I saw him play down in Bloomington for the IU team camp, actually back in June for a few games as well. But I think what you get, with Khristian Lander is, and no groundbreaking news, is just the way how quick he is, the way he can get to a place and make it look real easy. I think he's just very athletic that way. He can make one move and all of a sudden he shakes a defender, and that type of thing is just, you can't teach that. That's just, being really talented and also knowing where he wants to get to before he does it. I think that's what strikes you with Khristian Lander. And, I think he's more of a kind of more of a scorer on his high school team for sure. Although his assists are pretty high up there too, and he can definitely create for his teammates. But I think on that team, probably like any great player at the high school level, he's doing a little bit more scoring than he might when he gets to IU, where I think he'll be more of he'll be able to score, but I think he's going to facilitate more and be that sort of a guard, and I think he can be good at that. I think the one thing maybe, that you look at with him is just consistency, and sometimes, that's just part of growing up and becoming that, play in, play out, day in, day out type of player, is just how consistent can you be? And, I think he's got that in him. It's just a matter of doing it. And, he's got all the attributes. That's why he's ranked so highly nationally, is he's got all the attributes. He's, I always like left-handed guards, watching them. That's always a little bit of a unique thing too. And he's fun to watch. Like I said, he can get to a spot, unlike a lot of point guards can, the very, very high level elite type guys can do. So that strikes you with Khristian Lander. And, good shooter, good scorer. And I think, like I said, I think he's going to get better and better as he gets stronger and more physical. And, I think he'll become more of a creator as well. But, just the explosiveness, I think, is something that really stands out with him. And, he's, like I said, he looks for his own shot a lot right now, but I think he'll be more of a true point guard as time goes on.
Kyle, one of the interesting things to me with Lander is, and I don't know if it's because he's from Evansville and maybe he doesn't get the same amount of coverage that the Indianapolis area does, or even a guy like Romeo Langford, who everyone knew about. It kind of seems like he's still an unknown a little bit to some people based on his ranking. I mean, there's not a lot of times where you see a guy that's ranked this high, and there's still a lot of people just trying to figure out what exactly he is as a player. I know you talked about some of his strengths. What for him to, if he's going to do the reclassification thing, or even when he gets to, college in 2021, what are some of the things in your mind that he needs to get better at to be able to kind of make an instant impact from day one? And how do you see him fitting with Rob Phinisee?
Yeah, I think with that, like I said, I think it's consistency is a lot of it. I think his getting physically stronger. I don't know what he weighs now, but he does look like he's fairly light, and that's not unusual. I mean, that's just the natural maturation of a high school kid. Just kind of growing into their body some, but. I think it's that aspect. If you're going to reclassify, you're losing a year of the physical development. So that's something that would have to come along relatively quickly. And we see, when kids get to college in the summer, they immediately become, getting in that college weight program and nutrition program. Their bodies change a lot, just in a couple of months. So I think that would be, if he ends up reclassifying, that would be a big deal for him. But that is interesting. With Phinisee, he's obviously got he's got a head up on him because he's been in the program, and I think they're a little bit different type of players, but I think would fit well together. I think Lander is definitely more of a scorer, although Phinisee did that a lot in high school too. I mean, his senior year, he was 30 points plus a game for McCutcheon, so. He can do that as well, and showed he could do it in high school. I think Lander's probably a little bit more of a high-level prospect. I don't remember what Rob's recruiting rankings were, but I don't think he was quite as high as what Lander is now. I believe Lander's up to about 11 in the composite rankings. So, but I do agree with you when you talk about the just kind of the overall just people knowing about Khristian Lander. Compared to guys like Romeo or, Indianapolis area guys, I think part of it is, you don't see him quite as much day in, day out. At least I don't, not living in Evansville. So, obviously there's that part of it. And he did, he did play up a level with his AAU team and was still, very much a standout in, playing at that level last summer. So I think that kind of proved to people like, this, he can, be an elite level guy, and I think showed that, playing on the Indiana elite team with Leo and Galloway and those guys. So, he's got it. He's got it in him. I think it's just a matter of like I said, just being more consistent, play to play, game to game, being that dominant guy that he shows he can be. Just doing that all the time, and that's easy to sit here and say, but I think he's capable of being that type of guy who can dominate a game that way, I think he can dominate a game and score 15 points. I mean, I think he's that type of player, who can do that without scoring a bunch of points necessarily. He's just the way he can lead a team and be that facilitator.
Kyle, Archie Miller has now landed, I believe it's 8 Indiana high school players since he's taken over in Bloomington. And if you count Joey Brunk as a grad transfer, it's 9. Have you been at all surprised at how easy he's kind of made it look in terms of landing some of the best kids in Indiana? I know he didn't get Keon Brooks, but other than that, there's a few here and there that have gone elsewhere, but it seems like the guys that he's really locked in on from day one, with the exception of Keon Brooks, he's gotten for the most part. Has that been at all surprising, just kind of what we saw in the later years of Tom Crean and the difficulties for the program getting the top in-state kids? Have you been at all surprised at how Archie has kind of been able to make this look easy so far?
Yeah, I mean, I'm both, I'll straddle the fence because I am surprised that he's had that much success. I'm also not surprised because everything I hear from the high school coaches says that he's put the time in, and he's made a conscious effort in the state. So from that aspect, I'm not surprised. But you kind of are surprised too, because man, it's like everybody he's gone after in the state for the most part. Like you said, Keon was one they weren't able to get, and that to be honest, I was surprised that they didn't get him. I thought they were in good position with him at various points in that recruitment too. So. But yeah, I mean, it's been a dramatic turnaround from that aspect. I know Tom Crean got a lot of, criticism, for not recruiting in the state. And there was various reasons I actually had a conversation with Tom Crean about that. There's various reasons for, why that didn't happen. And every recruitment is its own recruitment, and everybody's different. So there was various reasons for that, but, there's also various reasons that Archie Miller's getting all these guys. It's not like you just get one and then everybody comes, but I think there is some Pied Piper effect to that a little bit, but every guy's going to do, what they feel like's best for their own situation. And, for now, he's done a great job of getting who he wants to get in the state. And the 2021 class, and I'll include Lander in that for now, that's a huge class as well. You talk about Trey Kaufman and Caleb First, and, that class is loaded. They're not going to get, everybody obviously out of that class, but if they can get a couple more, whatever that ends up looking like, that's going to be a good haul. There's plenty to go around in that class for everybody in the state and out of the state. It's just a really, really good class. So, but if they can get, Lander was a big one in that class, and I don't know what Kaufman's timeline is necessarily. I did talk to him not too long ago, but I feel like they're in a pretty good position with him too. Along with some others, and that would be significant in my opinion as well, because I think he's got a ton of potential down there at Silver Creek too.
Kyle, getting back to Khristian as a player, one of the things that it feels like Archie Miller has struggled with over his first couple of years is, finding guys who kind of bring it, especially defensively, game in, game out. And one of the reasons why Indiana fans have been so excited about guys like Trey Galloway and Anthony Leal who are coming in next year is they seem to kind of fit that mold. Tough guys, like to defend, really seem to have that consistent motor. And obviously Khristian played with those guys in AAU. They seem to all be good friends. How does he project to you as far as that goes? Just in terms of motor and attitude and willingness as a defender, because that really seems like something that is so important to Archie, like finally fully putting his stamp on the IU program.
Well, yeah, I think that's a great point, because I think those guys do fit that. And I think they will, especially if you look at a guy like Trey Galloway, you mentioned him. I mean, it doesn't take long watching him play to understand, like, this guy, he's going to give you everything he's got, every play, and he's going to make people around him better. And same goes for Leal, but Leal fits another need as well. He's a good shooter. I think Galloway's more of the, you're gonna play like I'm gonna play type of guy. And I think Lander fits that as well. I think he is a good defender. I think I always look at the physical tools first. I mean, do you have the physical tools to play at that level? Yes or no? And obviously the box is yes in Lander's case. And then, you watch him play and you see that he does have that drive and that motor. I think it's just, like I said, for him, it's just, are you going to do it consistently? And I think he will. I mean, I think everybody, eventually, realizes that that's just the way it's got to be. And if you don't, then you're not going to play. But I think not that he has that in him, but I think he's definitely a good defensive player. He's, like I said, he's quick. I mean, that's the first thing that stands out on both ends of the floor. So I think he can be a really good, energetic defensive player. And like you said, being around Leal and Galloway, those three have a good chemistry as it is. So I think all of them are sort of the same mindset and of the same mentality of, they're going to get after it, and they all want to be there for a reason, and I think that's an important thing. And, so I think, to answer your question, I think, they all kind of fit that mold of what he's looking for on the defensive end for sure.
Last question for Kyle. The one thing, this is obviously a very, very exciting day, for Indiana fans. One thing that I'm a little bit concerned about, especially if he reclassifies, being that young and coming into college, you see the number 11 by his name, and fans are going to have certain expectations about the impact that he can make from day one. But even a guy like Yogi Ferrell, who, seemed as close to a finished product coming out of high school as anybody, struggled a little bit to get acclimated. Are you worried at all about undue expectations, unfair expectations being placed on Khristian, especially if he reclassifies, that may take him a little bit longer to live up to than maybe what people are thinking? Or do you think that he projects to be a guy who can really, hit the ground running from day one, no matter whether he comes next year or the year after?
Well, I think that's one of the things I hate about this is that, the expectations get so out of control, and it's just, I understand it's a microwave society, and that's kind of how college basketball has to be anymore. You don't have time to develop over a 4-year period. Not necessarily, because everything changes so fast. And I hate that. I hate that, guys go into anywhere and the expectations are just out of control, especially at IU where, and understandable, those guys know to a certain extent what they're getting into. From that standpoint, that's part of the attraction. That's part of, it's part of being part of that big show there. And that's a good thing in a lot of respects. It means the expectations are high and you're expected to come in and work your butt off. And I think that's a good thing. But yeah, I mean, he's going to have, anybody who goes in is going to have some, learning curve. I mean, Trace Jackson Davis, as good as he's been, there's been times where, he's had to learn and had his bumpy road. And that's kind of how it is for any freshman, no matter how highly touted you are. I think every time you have this happen, you've seen it from, going back to Yogi Ferrell and Cody Zeller and people get so ramped up and energized by the recruitment, and the name almost becomes bigger than anything. We got Khristian Lander, and it becomes this sort of messiah type of a deal. And I hope that's not fair to him. It's not fair to, a 17-year-old kid who's super talented, but still has, a lot of progression left to him. So, that's one, covering recruiting. I sometimes see, the guys kind of go through, being a teenager and loving the attention. And then gosh, you feels like the world crashes down on you when you screw up. And that's hard. I mean, that's really hard. So, I hope people are understanding that it's going to be, there's always, it doesn't mean they're a disappointment if they come in and go 0 for 7 in their first game or something. I mean, that's the way the world works. It's more about how you respond to that than having a bad game. So, and I think people understand that for the most part. Realistic people do, and I hope people don't get the expectations just so out of control that they don't see the forest from the trees. But this is a good thing, obviously, for IU. It just beware that there will be some growing pains for Khristian, like there is for anybody. But they're definitely getting a good one, so that's something to be really excited about.
Absolutely. Well, Kyle, thank you so much for your time. Follow Kyle on Twitter at Kyle Neddenriep. And, of course, now is a great time to be following Kyle with the high school basketball playoffs getting ready to start. I'm sure this is going to be a busy time for you, so we really appreciate you carving out some time for us this morning.
Absolutely, yeah. And I was actually out at a high school game last night when you messaged me, so I appreciate you getting back with me, and glad to be on with you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kyle.
Thanks, Kyle.
You bet.
All right, great stuff there from Kyle Neddenriep, as expected, Alex. The interesting thing with the Archie Miller era is it feels like if you don't like how things feel at a certain point, just wait a couple weeks and things will get better. And on the flip side, if you're starting to feel really good about things, a couple weeks later, things might not be as good. You think back to how we felt, walking out of Assembly Hall after that Purdue game a few weeks ago, and things really felt like they were in a tenuous spot. And now Indiana's won 3 out of 4, looking really good for the NCAA tournament. And Archie Miller just, locked down, one of the biggest recruits that he's gotten. So things are obviously feeling much better now. Sticking with the Lander recruitment real quick, just from a big picture view for what this means for Archie, whether Lander comes next year or the year after that. I mean, how big is it, to get him? And really, it seems like kind of, further extend the recruiting momentum that he obviously had early from Romeo to Trace, but that felt like it might be teetering a little bit. This seems to really have re-solidified that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think more or less in today's age of social media and the 24/7 news cycle, you're oftentimes just kind of judged by a majority of the people that follow you or your fans by what have you done recently, right? It's what have you, you're, as a coach, you're only as good as your last game. As a recruiter, you're only as good as the last guy you landed. And so it's, I think, big this last 2 weeks, not only the Lander commitment, which is obviously a big deal, just because Indiana is obviously in need of better talent. I think we can all agree on that in the backcourt. But the fact that they have been able to win 3 of their last 4 and kind of put themselves now in position to make the tournament, you're always going to have people who are ready to kind of make a big picture call on somebody based on how things are going. But I think we were getting to a point with Archie Miller late in season 3 where it was kind of fair to start to ask some of these questions and wonder what the direction was going to be for the long term. So I didn't have a problem with that. I always thought that, it would be fair to give him, at least 4 seasons to kind of give a full picture of kind of what he could do as a coach. And for him, I think now that he's kind of got this team barreling towards the tournament, assuming they can, win a couple games here down the stretch, I think you look at now, you say, all right, the first year in Bloomington was, his first kind of dip into the water. They didn't make the postseason. Last year was a disappointment, but they did make the NIT. The logical progress for year 3 would be making the tournament. So I think if they do make the tournament this year, coupled with the fact, as we mentioned in our discussion with Kyle, the recruiting success that he's had in state, I think it's, obviously a step in the right direction for the program. Obviously, going into next season, depending on kind of who's on the roster and how things shake out, the expectations are going to be ratcheted up another notch, and he's going to have to meet those expectations. But, I give him credit for being able to kind of weather what was obviously a difficult stretch there this season. It looked pretty bleak. Some of those games where they just got completely manhandled on the road, you wondered if they were going to win another game. But maybe we look back in a couple of years at that Minnesota game and say that was kind of the turning point for this team, because, even if they don't win at Purdue this week or they don't win at Illinois, assuming they can win, 1 or 2 down the stretch here at home and maybe a game in the Big Ten tournament, they're going to be in the NCAA tournament. And from there, I think fans are going to be happy and excited about the future of this program. So it's been, to me, an impressive turnaround, and Archie Miller deserves the credit for that.
One last question on Lander, I guess, topic of discussion on Lander before we look ahead to the 2 road games coming up. Let's say that he does reclassify and he comes in next year. And I don't know what the likelihood of that is. It seems like it's trending in that direction a little bit, but we'll just have to wait and see. The expectations are going to be high, 5-star prospect. That's just undeniable. But when you look at next year for Indiana, obviously, you're going to lose Devontae Green, but you're going to have a senior in Al Durham who's played a ton of minutes. You're going to have Rob Phinisee, who's been the guy at point guard for 2 years now, been a little bit up and down. Where would you kind of see Lander projecting in there? What do you think would be fair to expect? Because obviously he's going to be the most talented of all those guys, but it's going to be a difficult transition for him physically, mentally. Going from being a junior in high school to a freshman in college, like those are difficult transitions. And it seems to me, that the best case scenario, obviously, is, Al Durham's here, ready to be a really solid, consistent player as a senior. Rob Phinisee really kind of steps into the point guard role. He's been in it, but takes that next step to where it feels like he really firmly owns it, especially offensively, to where this year, he's felt much more tentative. And then Lander can kind of, slip into that and take what he's ready for, as opposed to being thrust into like having to be a playmaker from day one. That seems like it would be the most ideal. And it seems like Indiana, and obviously you have Armand Franklin too. It seems like Indiana might have, the depth at that position to do it if guys like Rob and Al are able to take that next step and relieve some of that pressure from Lander as a freshman.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about this as you were talking there. I can't recall too many freshman point guards that have come in and dominated or been elite from day one in the Big Ten. Who in recent memory, I know Trey Burke was at Michigan, was really good from day one, but you look at some of the best.
Cassius is probably the only other guy, and he's one of the best ever.
Yeah, and Cassius was good, but if you remember, he wasn't starting. It was Lou Rawls, Tum Tum Nairn that was starting for Michigan State. It was a big thing with Michigan State fans, like, why is Tum Tum still starting? And I think that went on maybe for at least the freshman year, maybe another season. And Yogi, as you mentioned, came in from day one, and he had his struggles. He was a great player. Yogi, I don't think people understand how great of a college player he was. And from his freshman year to his senior year, he made a ton of improvement. This year in the Big Ten, obviously DJ Carton has had to undergo some struggles off the court. But even when he came in, he was the highest ranked, I think, point guard coming into the Big Ten, and he was splitting time at Ohio State. He's an ultra talented, high level kid. So I think it's going to be one of those situations where, it's going to be important for Indiana's other guards to play well, because you don't want to put too much on somebody too soon. I mean, I think his talent is undeniable. I think he's going to be able to make an impact from day one in some capacity, whether that's if he reclassifies or if he sticks in his original class. I mean, he's obviously going to be a guy that's going to see the court from day one. I don't know that he comes in and you play him 30 or 35 minutes a game from day one. I just don't necessarily I can't necessarily predict that to happen. I mean, Romeo to me was, in terms of in person, the most dominant high school player I saw in the state since Eric Gordon. And he came into Bloomington and, he averaged 16 or 17 points a game. And I thought people kind of lost their minds that he wasn't better than that. And I'm like, wow, this guy's having a really good freshman year. And
nobody reasonable did that.
Exactly.
I mean, he was great.
I think, exactly. I thought he was great. So I'm saying I think a lot of what Kyle said in terms of setting realistic expectations are going to be important for this situation. You see the number 11 ranking, you hear the words 5-star, you hear, potential to be a really, a 1 or 2 year player. And all of a sudden, sometimes your mind wonders, like, how good is this kid really going to be? I mean, I think it's important, if he does reclassify, that he's got two guys that he spent a lot of time with on the AAU circuit, and Anthony Leal and Trey Galloway, that he's real comfortable with, that he's friends with. And Indiana's going to have some older players on the team next year, assuming there's not a ton of roster turnover or anything unforeseen that we don't, know what's going to happen with this new transfer rule. But we'll see, what he's able to do from day one. I agree with Kyle. I hope that he's not placed under a microscope and everything picked apart, what he does on a game-by-game basis, because he's going to be a freshman in college basketball. He's going to have his ups and downs. I think he has a chance to be a really good, really special player. But like anybody that comes into college basketball, it's a huge adjustment, and I think he's going to have to go through it like anybody else.
Yep. All right, so let's turn our attention forward because Indiana, as we mentioned, playing a lot better. They're at 18 wins now. Won 3 out of 4. Now 2 really big road games coming up against Purdue and Illinois. I think for a long time, most of us, you and I included, have looked at these 2 road games as probable losses. Before the Minnesota game, looked at them as almost certain losses, where it just didn't really seem like there was a path to Indiana winning. The fact that Indiana went and did what they did at Minnesota, a good but not great team, but still, in a road venue to play like that, it gives you some hope. And you look at what this Purdue team has done since they played Indiana. They've lost 4 straight games. Now, they've lost them all to good teams, at home to Penn State and to Michigan, on the road to Ohio State and Wisconsin. And you can kind of argue it one of 2 ways. You can say, wow, this Purdue team is really struggling. Kind of feels like their season's teetering on the brink. They're 14-14. Maybe we're catching them at the right time now, because they're not playing very well. On the flip side, you could be going into a really desperate team. We know Mackey Arena will be energetic and loud, and if you're facing a Purdue team that's got their back up against the wall and they come out and play with their hair on fire, is this Indiana team going to be ready? Here's what I will say. Like, the way that I kind of feel like this game is going to go, the way I'm a little bit afraid that it's going to go, is actually how Indiana's game against Iowa went, which is, to me, what I think needs to happen is Indiana has got to come out and jump on them right away. Quiet the crowd, maybe, not let them build any confidence. Because if you remember that Indiana-Iowa game, when Indiana had lost 4 straight games, we all talked about something good needs to happen early for Indiana. And they got up, Indiana's up 14 points 10 minutes into the game. Devontae Green comes in and goes off. And, Indiana kind of controlled the game from there. Given kind of what Purdue has done at home, that feels like a somewhat likely scenario. But I think for Indiana to avoid that, they've got to come out with a different mentality early in this game than they've had, which is play through trace, really come with some confidence to win this game, play physical, play tough. It's not something we've seen from them on the road, but boy, if we do see it, to me, that'll be a huge sign of growth for this team. And this would obviously be a massive, massive win for Indiana and for Archie Miller to get that monkey off his back of not having beaten Purdue. So I think there's a ton at stake. I still feel like it's unlikely that Indiana actually wins the game, but it as I mentioned, it does seem like there's actually more of a path to it now based on how they've played recently. Is that a fair assessment of what to expect?
Yeah, and I also think a lot of it is dependent on Purdue's mindset coming into the game, right? Because you mentioned the fact that they've lost 4 straight. they are being told now that if they're what 14-14. If they don't basically win out the regular season, they're not going to make the tournament or really have a chance to get in. So, is their mindset going to be, all right, we've lost 4 in a row, we're not going to the tournament, we're going to, we don't have a lot to play for? Or is it going to be, hey, this is our Super Bowl every year, we have to win this game regardless of whether or not we make the tournament? We want to make it as tough as possible in Indiana. I think the latter scenario is obviously the more likely one. There's been they've lost some home games. Obviously, they lost to Texas earlier in the season. They had a disappointing loss recently at home to Penn State, but for the most part, they've played really well at home against some good teams. I mean, they destroyed Michigan State. I know they beat Wisconsin pretty badly at home. They've had some other games. I know they lost recently at home to Michigan, but they've for the most part been a good home team. So I think the atmosphere is going to play a big part of it. From an Indiana perspective, it comes down to me. Like you said, do they get off to a good start? Are they engaged? If Purdue's going to play hard, Indiana's going to have to play harder than Purdue. It's not like you have to match their energy. No, you have to surpass their energy. You're on the road. The crowd gives them a ton of energy. The thing I've noticed every time that I go into Mackey Arena, and as great of an environment as Assembly Hall, I think they're neck and neck for the best when they're on fire. But when Indiana's in that place is like, you feel like the roof's going to come off. I mean, they've been waiting all season for this, and Indiana can't just match Purdue's energy; they have to exceed it. And to me, that a lot of that is going to have to do with how the seniors come out and play, the upperclassmen. Can they take care of the ball? As you said, they have to play through Trace. And I think if you come out with the energy and you say, "Hey, you're not going to just wipe us off this court. We're going to be here for all 40 minutes." That's when the doubt starts to creep into Purdue's mind. What Purdue wants to do is they want to hit Indiana with a couple punches and they want to get a double-digit lead, and then all of a sudden the crowd's into it and it's over from that point. And that's the dream scenario from a home team. We've seen it time and time again at Assembly Hall. Indiana comes out and they get a huge lead on a team, and then the other team, it kills their morale, it kills their spirit, and Indiana can't afford that to happen. So what I'm looking for is the first 5 to 10 minutes. I think that's going to tell us a lot. If Indiana doesn't come out as the aggressor, as the team that looks like they want it more, I just don't see it as a game they're going to win. That's the bottom line.
Well, and I think, look, I mean, everybody's going to be important. Having Race Thompson back healthy, he wasn't very healthy the first time. That's going to be important. Eric Hunter really outplayed Rob Phinisee in that first game. That can't happen again. Devontae Green has actually been, knock on some wood somewhere, like a little bit more consistent recently. Giving Indiana 9, 10, 11 points, you're going to need that kind of boost. Do you get the Justin Smith from the final 10 minutes of the Penn State game or from the first 20 minutes of the Penn State game? Because if you get the guy that was there the final 10 minutes, that's a guy that helps you win road games because he's getting rebounds and playing tough. But the biggest key to me is Trace because, it's very hard to be a consistent team, let alone a consistent road team, when you're relying on a freshman to be your best player and to be the focal point of your offense, because it's difficult for freshmen to bring that same mentality game in, game out, especially, a freshman like Trace that's getting banged on and playing down low in a league like this with so many big guys. And perhaps the biggest reason for the turnaround from Indiana and the reason why they beat Minnesota and the reason why they beat Penn State, even if his numbers weren't as good, is he allowed Indiana to play through them because he was more consistent, he was more confident, and he was just, there for every minute of the game instead of kind of fading in and out or not showing up like the Michigan game. And that, to me, is the key. Can he be that guy, playing against Matt Harms, playing against Travion Williams for 40 minutes? Because if he does, he gives Indiana an anchor that everybody else can revolve around, and it just makes things work better. And, so that's the key. Is he going to be that guy in Mackey Arena? If he is, I think Indiana's going to have a good chance to win this game. I really do. I think they can make it a 40-minute game. But I think Trace has to be that guy, and it's scary because he's a freshman. But he's got to be that guy, and then all the pieces around him, have to fill in like they have. That's the path for Indiana winning this game, along with get out there and defend threes. Don't let them make a bunch of threes early, literally, I would rather them get the ball inside and get some layups rather than letting Stefanovic or those guys get good looks from three, because you can't let the floodgates open early. You really need to just, just try to stem the tide early on. Don't let them go nuts, and that way, if you can get to the the second TV timeout with it still a game, now it's like, okay, now you kind of got your sea legs and you're ready to roll. I mean, Purdue will bury teams early. They did it to Michigan State. They did it to Iowa. Like you said, Indiana cannot let that happen to them. And if they do, I think this can be a good 40-minute game. But that's the path. So we'll see if Indiana can do it, because they, we beat Minnesota, but as we recall, the road games before that did not go so well. So hopefully there's been some actual growth and Indiana's ready to do it. But we'll find out Thursday night. I just know that I feel better about it certainly now than I did a couple weeks ago, and I think everybody shares that feeling. Then you got Illinois coming up after that. This is a venue that Indiana has played much better in recently. They delivered one of their best performances of the year there last year. But obviously this Illinois team is much better. Which game do you think is more likely for Indiana to get?
That's a great question. I mean, they've played so well against Brad Underwood's coach teams in Illinois, but Illinois the last 2 years hasn't been the team that they are this year. Although they have had some games at home that have been just kind of disappointing performances. I know they lost a really bad game in the back, all the way back in the Big Ten ACC Challenge. I mean, to Illinois, the thing about them is, they've got some really good players in their starting lineup with Io and obviously Kofi Coburn, and Trent Frazier's another guy who's really good. But I don't know about their depth beyond those guys. I mean, Georgie Bashanesvili has been one of the more disappointing players in the Big Ten this year. He was a guy that I think a lot of us thought was going to break out and have a chance to be an all Big Ten type player, and that really hasn't come to fruition. So they have to have their top three players playing really well. The other thing I'll say about that atmosphere, I don't know what it's been like this year, but the past 2 years when I was in Champaign, it hadn't been an overly intimidating atmosphere. I know this game's, I think they announced this game as a sellout several weeks ago, so it's going to be obviously a little bit different. And Illinois is going to the NCAA tournament here this season, so they've obviously had quite the turnaround this year. So we'll see it on the atmosphere. But between the two, I kind of feel like Illinois is probably maybe a better chance to win. They've won there more recently. Purdue, I've just seen too many teams come in there and just get throttled, and it feels like Purdue is going to have one of those performances. Obviously, they've played poorly recently, but they always seem to get up for Indiana. And Illinois, it's obviously not. It's a rivalry. It's not the same. And the fact that Indiana has played well there in recent years, Indiana, I don't think they've won it. They haven't won at Mackey since 2013.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a while for that. It's close. I would say Illinois maybe slightly, but I wouldn't be shocked if they lose both games. I also wouldn't be shocked if they won one. So it kind of feels like how the last 2 weeks have gone, right, Jerod? It's as you mentioned, kind of this roller coaster. It kind of feels like it's time now for maybe some adversity, and then a pressure cooker week coming home to have to win 2 games to kind of solidify and punch that ticket. It
would be very on brand for the program right now for that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, if they won both games, I think we would. I don't know if we would know how to react, right?
No, I mean. But I would look forward to having to, live in those uncharted waters.
Yeah, it'd be quite the turnaround. I mean, so yeah, I mean, between the two, I'd say slightly Illinois, but I don't know. If you ask me to predict if they were going to win either one, I don't necessarily feel confident in saying that I believe they're going to win either one. Could they? Yes, but I wouldn't predict it.
Let me get your thoughts on one more question, and then we'll get out of here. One of the biggest topics of discussion among IU fans this week. What would you do with the starting lineup? Would you keep Joey Brunk in there as Archie has? Would you make a change with it? What would be your preference, I guess?
I mean, I don't know that it necessarily matters too much when he's only going to play 6 minutes. I think that's what he played against Penn State. It was 6 minutes, so it wasn't like he was.
Yeah, but it seems like there's a difference between the start of the game and the second half, because the minutes he played at the beginning of the second half were pretty pivotal. I had more of an issue with that really than the start of the game.
Yeah, but it wasn't just him that was getting that. It wasn't just him that was the problem again the second half. That doesn't happen with just one guy. He wasn't on the court at the end of the first half when they kind of started giving the momentum back to the other team. So I can't.
True.
I mean, I understand the point of play the best five guys for whatever reason, and this has kind of been the thing with Archie Miller since he got here. He kind of sticks with starting lineups for long periods of time and is reluctant to make changes. I don't know what. Maybe I don't know. I honestly don't have an explanation for it, but I don't think it's that big of an impact if he's only going to play 6 minutes, which I think I had a question in the forum recently. It might have been earlier this morning. Someone asked me what happened to Joey Brunk, and I don't really know what to say. It seems to me that he's lost some confidence and he just hasn't played well. And when you get into kind of a rut like he has, it's really tough to dig out of it. But I think it would be a pretty significant development here over the last couple of weeks of the season if Indiana could get something from Joey Brunk, because there was a portion of the season where he was playing really well. I mean, the Michigan State win, he was good in that game. There were some early non-conference games, some of the bigger games that Indiana won in the non-conference. He was
he was the best player for a while, for like a 4-week stretch.
Exactly, and now it seems like since the Michigan State game, he's maybe the 8th or 9th best player on the team. So that I don't know exactly what's happened with him, but it'd be good to see him kind of get back into that earlier season form and maybe going into Mackey Arena and playing an in-state rival will kind of get him revved up and ready to go. But I don't think too much about the starting lineup. Now, if he was playing 25 minutes a game and not doing anything, then I would have a kind of a bigger question about that. But it just seems like the last couple of games he's been in there to start, and then he's been out pretty quickly and hasn't really come back in those halves, which I'd really be curious to kind of see. To have some insight as to what. Do you have any thoughts on what's happened to him? Has it just been he's just been exposed by bad matchups? But it just seems like it's a game in, game out basis now for him, where he's not really doing much at all.
I don't know. I have a really hard time feeling that he's the same guy now that he was 6 weeks ago, like physically. So like I have no knowledge of this, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's dealing with something. And I say that simply because, like, the one thing that you really trust about him is his ability to go get loose balls and be that tough guy, get rebounds, even if he's not scoring well. And he's struggled to do that, and it's not like he's going out there and loafing. It's like he's just, maybe can't get to him as quick. I mean, shoot, that Penn State game, and he got, while he was out there, he got down on the ground and, was fighting for loose balls. So something just seems a little different about him. And I think he's earned the trust of, of kind of thinking, hey, maybe something's wrong with this guy, but I guess, I know when it comes to starting, like I get where you're coming from. It's certainly more important who finishes the game, but those are 6 pretty important minutes, where you can really, really script, what lineup you really want to, you want to have out there at the beginning of the game against certain matchups of the other team. So I'm less concerned about it at the start of games than I am at halftime. When you've seen the game play out for 20 minutes, you can kind of figure out, okay, here's how we want to attack them in the second half. That was the problem with the Penn State game. Everybody played poorly, but they were getting Lamar Stevens switched on to him, and he was clogging things up for Trace, and it basically just killed 2 offensive possessions and 2 defensive possessions at a time where you needed to rebuild momentum. So and if he is struggling, maybe try and find minutes later in the game where you can put him against backup big men or in a particular matchup that's better. So I just think it's at a point where, for his sake and for the team's, it'd be better to have a different starting lineup. But I'm not saying you put Race in there, because I think his conditioning isn't to the point where he can play 30 minutes anyway. So I'm fine with him coming off the bench. But Duran has shown that he can handle some minutes, and I hear you don't want him to get in foul trouble early. But whether he starts the game or plays later, he's not playing more than 10-15 minutes. So maybe you go with him, or maybe if your goal is really to get Trace going, play smaller to start. Maybe you throw Jerome out there, you play 3 guards, whatever it is, along with Justin, and you give Trace an open lane to really get cooking early in the game. Yeah, I don't know that any of these are right. I just think, like, I'm at a point now where I'd like to see it. And Archie knows better. He would make a better decision about this than you or I would, obviously. It just seems from, our vantage point, kind of, watching the games and trying to judge this stuff, it seems like it might be beneficial to try now. And I guess that's kind of where I'm at. If not at the beginning of the games, then definitely in the second half when you have a better idea of how this game is flowing. That's where I'm at with it. But it's a small quibble overall because I think Archie's done a fantastic job the last 4 games of getting the season turned back around. So I don't want it to come across as being overly critical of Archie. I've really been impressed with what he's done to turn things back around. But this is one area where it seems like there might be an opportunity to, at the edges, be a little better at the beginning of games and halves, and maybe even get Joey going again by giving him a bit of a different role. I'd like to see it. We'll see if it happens. Really, what I want to see is more wins. So whatever gets us there, Coach, I'm on board with.
How do you see these final 4 games playing out from a record perspective?
I mean, I think the easy thing to say is 2-2. I think that's the safe thing. I think it's the most likely thing to say. But
of the home games, Wisconsin obviously scares you more than Minnesota, right?
Yeah, they definitely do. I don't know. I have a weird feeling that we're going to win one of the road games and that we're going to win one of the home games and then drop one of the home. That's what I mean. Yeah, that we're going to win one of each.
Win one on the road and lose.
Yeah, I don't know exactly why I feel that way. Certainly if Indiana can find a way to finish 3-1, that would be a massive victory to end the season. And then you get 21.
Because then you're talking about like a 7 seed or something potentially.
Possible, especially if you do anything in the Big Ten tournament. So, is that what you're saying? A 7 seed in the Big Ten tournament? No,
I'm talking about in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah,
potentially.
Yeah, I mean you could. So there's a lot out there for these guys. So I am trying to fully engage my excitement at the way they've played. 3 out of the last 4 games, while not going overboard with it, and remembering that this is still a team that's been kind of up and down. And as soon as you feel like you can trust them, sometimes they do something to remind you that you can't. And as soon as you feel like things are over, they remind you, hey, we're actually pretty good, and so it feels most likely that they'll probably have a couple really good performances, one that probably isn't so good. And then, we'll see from there. But I think it's most likely 2-2, but I have a lot more confidence now that they can go win one of these road games. And if they can do that, they should win both of the home games down the stretch. Now should, and this team haven't always, turned into the results that you want, but I mean, right. Again, it's a heck of a lot better position to be in now than we were 2 weeks ago. So hopefully that's a sign that things have actually improved, not that it was just, kind of a small sample size thing. But we'll see. Now we get some more games, and we'll get to see it proven on the court.
In this season of college basketball, I think I've just come to the conclusion that I will be surprised by nothing that happens, especially after what Duke did last night to Wake Forest.
Yeah.
Collapsing like they had and losing that game. There's been so many weird outcomes. And with Indiana, they've obviously beaten some really good teams, had some really good moments. They've also had some lackluster performances that they've been criticized for, and justifiably so. But I think the reality is that this is a solid to average team, and they're going to have their moments where they look really good, and they're going to have their moments where they struggle. You just hope that when it comes down to the end of the season here, the stretch run, that they're playing kind of their best basketball.
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of run this team's capable of going on in Indianapolis or beyond that, but you just hope that whatever they do, they're playing well. If they, it's one thing. I've always said it's one thing to lose a game if you've played your best and you're playing your best basketball at the right time. It's quite another to, go to Wisconsin and get down by 30. So
yeah,
I would just like to see kind of the engaged, the team that's kind of locked in, the team that looks a little bit more together down the stretch, just out of curiosity, just to see what they could do, right, if they reach their full potential. Because I feel like this is a team that could be a tough out in March tournament play, because when they are taking care of the ball, when they are engaged from an energy perspective, they do a lot of things that lend to success in the tournament. They rebound the ball, they get to the free throw line. So your mind starts to wonder what could this team be. You just want to see them play well at the right time, and so that's what I'm most looking forward to these next 2 weeks. They could go to Purdue and Illinois and play really well and lose both games.
Yep.
But I think more or less we're looking to kind of see the sustained effort that we've seen the last couple of games, and if they do that, I think they set themselves up well to have a strong finish to the season.
Absolutely. All right. Well, our thanks to Kyle Neddenriep for coming on, talk about Khristian Lander. and we will have the post-game show for you after the IU Purdue game on Thursday night. And, of course, Inside the Hall will have a ton of content after that game as well. Hopefully it's a good Indiana performance, and, heck, if it's a victory, what biggest victory of Archie Miller's tenure if they win at Purdue? I've had this discussion with a bunch of people. Obviously, it's not as, in terms of, like, best win just individually, it was probably the win at Michigan State last year. But like most meaningful, I think you can make an argument that this would be it if they can get it.
I think so. I mean, he hasn't beat him yet. I mean,
that's what I mean.
To me, it's like the only teams he hasn't beat since taking over at Indiana are Purdue and Michigan. And to me, those two programs right now represent like two of the top 4 programs in the conference. So if you aspire to be in those spots one day, and that's what you're building toward, you got to start beating these teams. And so this, they don't have a shot at Michigan, at least right now. Maybe they see them in the Big Ten tournament. But this is their shot at Purdue. Purdue came to their place, beat them by 12. So there's an impressive response to me would be going up there and winning. And then, I mean, you do 2 things, but this would be why I would maybe call it the biggest win. You do 3 things. You pretty much make yourselves a tournament lock at that point for Indiana.
Yes.
You end Purdue's season, and you get the whole "I can't beat Purdue" moniker off your back if you're Archie Miller. So that's 3 pretty big things. So yes, I would put it in biggest win of his tenure category if he can do it.
Yep. All right. Well, let's hope he can. It'd be a big one if we can get it. And we will talk to you guys next week on another brand new edition of Podcast on the Brink. Take care, everybody. Thank you for listening to this episode of Podcast on the Brink. We always appreciate you being here. Remember to join me and my co-hosts for more IU basketball talk at assemblycall.com, and visit Alex over at insidethehall.com for complete coverage of Indiana basketball. If you want to support Podcast on the Brink, here is the single best way to do it. Tell anyone you know who loves IU hoops about us and suggest that they subscribe. Podcast on the Brink can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else podcasts are available. Tell your social media followers, email your friends, text your family members. For weekly discussion about IU basketball, they need to be subscribed to Podcast on the Brink. We'll talk to you next time. Go Hoosiers.